Let's talk about February and every single thing coming out in February. The first thing down. I don't know why I'm laughing so much. Maybe it's going to be incredible. Suicide Squad. February 2nd, my friend.
God, I really hope the codes come through for that game. Genuinely, right? Everyone's slagging it off. Everyone, rightfully so, is pointing out how repetitive the gameplay looks. Yeah. But there's something about those cutscenes. There's something about the potential of the story, and I've mentioned this before, that is just, to me, if they can't botch it. Like, surely, in terms of story, in terms of character, in terms of the scope of what they built from that side of things, like, this is still Rocksteady. They might have changed their gameplay approach. They might have had to make some caveats to Warner Brothers, who knows, but they are great at presentation. They are great at presenting a story, and I know Arkham Knight's narrative is, of course, divisive. I happen to still really love it in the swings they took, especially towards the end with some of the first-person dream-like levels that you get. And if there's anything like that in here, it will be worth playing. I just don't think, and maybe we'll disagree on this, that it's going to be a Gotham Knights situation where, to me, that was so mid. Like, the story was mid, the combat was mid, the world was mid. I think that even if I think if even the combat in world is a little bit empty in Suicide Squad, I hope, and maybe I'm being naive, that story will make it worth experiencing.
If they can pull off an actual story with a fundamentally co-op-based gameplay model, that'll be a world first.
Yeah.
So maybe. If anyone can do it, it's Rocksteady. They came out of nowhere and did Arkham Asylum. I just don't have any faith in it. However, it's a curio. I'm very curious about what they've done after this long and for how long it's been in development, but everything's stacked against it. Like, it's just, they haven't even been doing review codes, which you can argue is because they need a live environment for all the servers and everything, but they did do a beta, so there is a previous version out there to get hands-on. Obviously, the response on the critical side was very, very negative, and we haven't had access to it at all, probably for good reason, considering the amount of videos that we've done on it, which is fair enough, but now that we're this close to the review period, the launch period, it just feels like it's a dead game walking, and I'm curious if that actually does permeate the social media conversations, the online conversations, the gamer conversations, permeates through to the mainstream. Do you have those casual friends that are looking forward to it? Is it more of a thing where it takes off anyway? I'm just curious, and it's like, I want Rocksteady to be okay.
Yeah.
Like, I feel sorry for them genuinely in regards to the way that the development of this is rumored to have gone, where they were given Suicide Squad when WB Montreal had a version of it in the works. It was given to Rocksteady. I'd love clarification on that, if anyone else can provide it. But it feels like they were then given it to get this over the finish line, and almost like a Warner Brothers style thing, where the overarching corpo side of it was like, Suicide Squad's our thing, we're doing the movie, we're going to have the game, get this stuff done. And it was never their bread and butter, and you saw so many staff leave, including the founders of Rocksteady. And so I just want this out the way so they can do something else.
Well, here's the worry. We're going to talk more about this on the Wednesday podcast that goes out, but there was a recent report from Variety that was looking into the W Games division and how that is being more incorporated within the larger framework of Warner Brothers. Like, James Gunn is going to have more direct oversight over the DC slate of games, and they're looking to essentially just monetize their portfolio more. They said they're doubling down on live service games. They're going all out on player retention, so we don't just, as in their words, literally pay for a blockbuster once every 3 or 4 years. They're going to find ways to keep these games alive through live services. So when you talk there about, you just kind of want Rocksteady to be able to get this out of the way and move on to a Rocksteady game, I don't even know if that's going to be in the future. And it's a shame because, I don't want to speak for any of the developers, don't know any of the developers. But you have to assume this isn't necessarily the direction they wanted to take, at least from a gameplay perspective. Story-wise, it might be exactly what they wanted to do. But that overall mandate, you can just feel it creeping in. You mentioned Mortal Kombat 1 before, and that being over-monetized. That's another WB game. They've made these mistakes in the past with Middle-earth, Shadow of War. A promising
it just kills it.
franchise, which killed it dead, So it's not the right approach. But with Suicide Squad, I hope, beyond hope, that it is good, that it is worth playing, that it has something there, that Rocksteady spark, that Rocksteady soul. But maybe that, like I said, maybe that's naive because it seems like everyone has just turned on it.
True. It is worth saying that, like, obviously the hands-on stuff, our own Ewan Patterson played it as well and did confirm, like, the cutscenes, the character writing, it is very, very funny. It's very tightly written, like, the actual characterization. Samoa Joe's King Shark, for God's sake. Like, that stuff's great. It's just the way that it plays, and that's the stuff that is the most directly influenced by the corporate side of it. How much do we monetize this stuff? And like you you think back on how awesome, I was going to say the one that was before Shadow of War, the Shadow of Mordor.
Yes.
How awesome that was, how well received that was, arguably Game of the Year 2014. And then you had Shadow of War, which had great mechanics, but it had everything else around it that brought it down, and it killed it. We haven't had a Middle-earth game since then. Which is such a shame because that game plays so uniquely. The framework of it is so unique. And then I would argue that MK1 has been massively impacted by how aggressive that monetization is. And it's just the WB effect. Like, they just seem to drill everything into the ground.
Yeah.
And it's going to take more seismic mess-ups before the people at the top realize. Like, there was that whole thing when Zaslav first mentioned that they want to do more games as a service type stuff. And it was just people pointing out the amount of them that have failed, including the Avengers, which will be a direct analog to a multiplayer superhero loot thing.
Again, don't want to cannibalize our own podcast, but I think it's fascinating that, Zaslav is out there saying we want more live service games, but at the same time saying James Gunn's going to have more oversight and these games are going to be canon. Like, I don't know if you want to do live service games as canon, surely, because then you imagine if the Avengers game was canon. You know what I mean? Like, that'd be mad. Like, they're just story driven, and live service mostly doesn't go hand in hand. There have been a few games that have bucked that trend, but more often they fall by the wayside. They don't manage to get that meat, and it becomes just a churn for mechanics. So I almost think it's a paradox, him saying, these are going to be important to the overall DC extended universe. I know it's not called that, but,
whatever, they don't even know what it is.
You don't even know what it is at this moment. DCU, I think it is just called. The Gunverse. But that to me is paradoxical when you're trying to make these games with high retention and based around a combat loop more than you are a story, if that makes sense. I think
they'll just take established narrative beats from the movies, the stuff that's ironclad, and then be like, and in between this, they went off and did all this stuff. Right, and then they went back, and then they sat down and had the scene again. I think that'll be the way that they'll attempt to split it. But whatever. I'm fascinated to see how this thing lands. But that's Suicide Squad February 2nd. Also on February 2nd is Persona 3 Reload, which I'm not spend too long on, but it's worth saying that obviously, like Persona fans, Atlas fans, been looking forward to this for a while. It's a weird approach to a remake where they're not including all the extra content that was in Persona 3 Portable, and when they put that game, I think it was on like 3DS or something. I've never actually played Persona 3. I'm a 4 and 5 guy, but I'm curious about this, and I think this is the one I'm going to dive into. It's just the way that they've rolled it out, where they put Persona 3 Portable, which, like I said, is the one with all the extra content on. They made that available on Switch, and they put it back out. I think it was on Xbox as well. But then they also said, we're also remaking Persona 3, and then this is like its own thing. And then so we're getting Persona 3 Reload, which looks to play more like Persona 5, but it doesn't have the extra character stuff, the extra expansion pack stuff that was in the portable version of the original Persona 3. So you're not getting like what could be a definitive edition. You're getting this, like, I don't know, for whatever reason, this trimmed version of it, which is drawn a little bit of ire amongst the Persona fans.
I'm an outsider's perspective on this. Persona is a franchise I've always been intrigued by.
Turn-based, my friend.
Turn-based, put me off. I'm sorry. I'm
loving it.
I'm a normie. What can I say?
You've turned the corner. Maybe now it's your thing.
I like swords. I like being a Ninja Gaiden. Mr. Ninja Gaiden is my guy.
You get swords in this game.
You can't do it with yourself, though. I want to feel the thrill of it.
You got to tell him to use the sword, and then he uses the sword.
The point is, I do think it's always poor form when you have a remake or you have a remaster that doesn't include everything and try to be the definitive edition, like you said. I talked up and loved The Last of Us Part 1, but in hindsight, now that Last of Us Factions has been cancelled, I can't believe that the definitive version of that game doesn't come with the multiplayer, because I thought that was such a huge part of the original game. And you can, obviously, it's a single player series, it's known for its narrative, but to just eliminate that sucks to me.
Yeah, and it's like the way that they're approaching it, where it looks absolutely gorgeous. Like, this would be the assumption would be this is the one to play. So we'll see how that thing shakes out. I might be wrong in regards to they could address the extra plot points in a different way or something like that. But the general conversation around it was we'll kind of wait and see how it feels. So that's on February 2nd as well, alongside Suicide Squad. And then a few days later, February 8th, is Helldivers 2, a game that Sony just refused to show anyone. There's like bits of gameplay, but there's no hands-on previews.
Yeah,
it's weird.
Ewan is really looking forward to this, I know.
He's the only person I know. Like, I don't know. I honestly haven't seen any positive buzz online. No one I know is talking about it. Like, even Sony are just kind of like, yeah, it's kind of there if you want it. We have no idea. It's a sequel to something that's 10 years old.
Yeah.
Whatever. And then bless little Ewan's like, I can't wait to play it. And I'm like, good on you, mate. I hope it's great. But I just I don't see anyone caring about this.
I hope it's a Returnal situation. That was similar in that they showed Returnal off a good few times, but I remember even us doing podcasts going, I don't know about this. You're selling it for $70 and it's a new IP and it's a roguelike and it's a shooter and it's from a studio that hasn't done a game of this scale before. Like, what's it going to be? And then, in my opinion, that turned out really well. It was a Game of the Year contender. So that's what I hope is the situation with Helldivers. Whether that actually happens, I don't know. I'm not even familiar with the original game, but what I've seen from the second one has got me intrigued way more than the original ever did. So, yeah, I think this is going to be definitely a wait and see one for me. I'll let Ewan take the charge in it, and I'll see what his opinions are afterwards.
Yeah, my overall point is just that I think they dropped the ball in the marketing or convincing you that it's a Sony first-party game, that it's a big deal. Because I think that gameplay-wise, it kind of looks a bit like Earth Defense Force, like mixed with the original Helldivers, which had like a cool little mechanics where you were sort of doing like fighting game combos to dial in specials. And it's like, I like the idea of what they were going for. I just found it really, really hard, and you needed to play as a squad.
Yeah.
And I was hardly ever in person with enough people to do that properly. But yeah, I imagine Helldivers 2 will capitalize on that more, and it's an over-shoulder third-person shooter, so it should be a bit more approachable. That's on February 8th. Tomb Raider's remasters, Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3 are coming February 14th. Just throwing this in there as, where are you at on these? I think they're interestingly presented.
Well, this is very personal to me because I'm always saying, you should bring back all of these old PlayStation era games and make them accessible. What's annoying me is that PlayStation keep doing this after I've put the effort in to track down the original copies and play them on PlayStation. I went and tracked down an old PS1 and a CRT TV, and then I got Star Wars The Phantom Menace. Now that's just on PlayStation Plus.
Right.
I went and tracked down the old Tomb Raider games, and now they're just coming remastered. And I think whoever's at Sony is watching my social media and seeing me post about these things. Why are you doing it to me? Give me a heads up before I go spend ludicrous money on secondhand copies. But no, in all seriousness.
Took so long for them to get here, though.
That's it, yeah. In all seriousness, man, I think, it's long overdue, but I like that they're here. I want to know, like, what modernizations have you brought to the table? But yeah, for something as iconic as the original Tomb Raider games, just having them available at all on modern hardware is a win, as long as they don't crap the bed like a GTA Definitive Edition, which I can't imagine. It's kind of like the Until Dawn remaster that we talked about in the news video, and I'm glad that it's there.
Well, the thing is with this, I had to Google that just to make sure, but they've said you can hit a button to switch back to classic graphics whenever you want.
Nice.
Which is like the Halo Master Chief Collection, or the anniversary edition of Halo, which I think should be standard in most remasters, let's say. It's just that the look of the Tomb Raiders, like, it just looks a bit weird, but I think there's only so much you can do when your actual, like, nav mesh of the actual level is already pre-made, and it has, I love the old school Tomb Raiders, but, like, they're so jagged, and cliffs have, like, now it's a box coming out of this wall so I can climb on it, and that's great. There's a lot of charm to that, but at the same time, I think it limits some of the visual presentation, and so I'm curious how they're going to sort of sell or be received. I'm just glad that games are available. Like, obviously, there's trophy support, achievement support, so yeah.
Another win for James Dowse. I remember maybe the last time he was on the podcast, he talked about he was either going back to replay them or he wanted to replay them,
right.
So that's a win for him. Yeah, it's funny because having gone back to the old Tomb Raider when I got that PlayStation 1, I think it was Tomb Raider 3. I forgot just how piss hard those things are.
Oh, dude, yeah.
And man, we as gamers and players do not know how good we have it these days. How did I ever play Tomb Raider when I was like 6? How did I get through it?
We just put up with it because we had nothing else.
Yeah.
Like, it was just like, you have no what. I remember when Splinter Cell Chaos Theory let you do that, you save anywhere, and that was mind blowing.
Yes.
But like, yeah, in Tomb Raider, it was like, do the entire climb or you're like starting again.
Because of that, I'm interested in how they're going to be received from a modern perspective. It's not that they're hard; it's just that they have a lot of those.
They're awkward.
They're awkward.
Yeah.
They are time wasty in a lot of ways, and you're doing big chunks of the level over and over again. Maybe not with the save anywhere feature that they've added, of course, but if you wanted to play them in their purest form, you'll be doing that. So yeah, I'm interested to see how they're received in 2024 because I love them, have a lot of nostalgia for them, but I can't imagine, me as 13 now, if I was 13 right now, going to Tomb Raider Remastered and having a fun time, but maybe they're not there for that. I like that they're just, they've been, what would you call it? Put in the library. They've been allowed to come back and be accessible for people who are interested in it. This isn't supposed to be like Grand Theft Auto Remastered or even Crash Remastered, you know what I mean? It's more of a, in my opinion, a curio kind of thing for people who didn't grow up with them.
That's the thing. It feels like an archival thing. It's like these games should be available.
That's the word I was looking for.
It's near enough that. But like still, like, you know, me and you love the Tomb Raider Anniversary game where they remade the original game. And it's like, I love that little trilogy of like the Anniversary one, Legend, and Underworld.
Yeah.
Like the way those games play, to me, is perfect Tomb Raider. I do the 2013 one. I thought like Rise and Shadow got worse, but like there's so many little gameplay tropes that were so identifiable as Tomb Raider tropes that we don't really have anymore. Like the idea of capitalizing on a big 3D space that you're conquering over time. Like it's just really, really cool. And so I wonder if people will latch onto that or whether it will just be too awkward, because the originals have that thing where it's like sidestep, get in the exact line. And if you're not even 1 centimeter off the end of the cliff, you haven't jumped far enough, she won't grab the edge. I assume they've tightened those bits up, but there is something to the playability of those originals that can be off-putting as hell.
It's funny. It's like, it's crazy to think back now, but I remember when they changed the input so you didn't have to jump and then press another button to grab the ledge. And I thought that was sacrilegious. I thought, why would you get rid of that? That's outrageous. And now I think, why was I so caught up on like this one button hang? There was something about the meticulousness, though, of those original games that, yeah, they're awkward. Yeah, they're sometimes very clumsy, especially when you mistime a jump and it's not your fault and you fall into a pit of spikes. But there is something still satisfying about having that level of control and, like you said, conquering that 3D world.
Yeah, man, that's the thing. There's something so satisfying about climbing in games. Like the early Assassin's Creed used to have that as an actual gameplay mechanic. The idea that each button was an arm, and they didn't really run with it that much. But I'll shout out Jusant that came out last year. That's a phenomenal game that kind of has, like, Death Stranding has a bit of climbing in it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, if you're going to make a parallel, like Jusant is almost like if you take the climbing aspects of Death Stranding and blow them all the way up, where you're putting pittons in the wall and making ropes and swinging, and like Jusant rules.
Speaking me language.
Yeah, Jusant's awesome. And like Tomb Raider can tap into that. These games won't necessarily. That's where that stuff came from. But I hope all of this is indicative of where Tomb Raider's going to go. Because like I said, I love that middle trilogy, and I hope they go back to that.
I've not seen the trailer since it was first announced, so they might have already answered this as well. But what I'm interested in is when they have been remastering these games. I remember, again, going back to the third game on the PlayStation 1, how much the draw distances of those games are a part of it, because you can't see crap until you're right up close to them. And I wonder whether if they've implemented something similar, like a fog system where you can't see the world, or if they are just giving you access to everything straight away so you can see the exit and enter
I had a little cheeky Google there, because I didn't know off the top of my head. Apparently, they've not addressed that yet. Looking at some of the hands-on stuff just there, saying that it's lots of fans requesting it, but nothing just yet. But you would make sense. That thing killed the Silent Hill remakes when they were originally remastered. But they're trying to walk a line between letting it feel like the originals and then making it work for a new audience. And I guess I'll just see how that stuff lands. That's on February 14th, which is a fun Valentine's Day release
for a
Tomb Raider game. Super quick, Mario vs. Donkey Kong's on February 16th.
What is this?
Well, that's the thing, right? I love, obviously, Nintendo, Mario, Donkey Kong, everything else, and I just don't care about this game. Like, it looks neat enough, but I think because the way that it looks seems like it's all boxed in. It looks like it plays like the original Donkey Kong games when Mario, it wasn't necessarily his debut, but he was called Jumpman back then. And they're trying to do like a modern version of that. Some of this, or a lot of this, to me, feels like a tide over because we're waiting for the Switch 2 and we're waiting for them to show us the next Metroid Prime or whatever it is. There's a whole thing doing the rounds about a Nintendo Direct that apparently has been leaked, and it'll have various games in there, but they all feel like stopgaps. It's like it's another Fire Emblem, it's another remaster of Metroid Prime 2 and 3. Things like that, and I feel like 2024 is a stopgap year. Because I think because of the pandemic, they had to push production back quite a lot. There was all those rumors across the pandemic of what the next Switch was going to be. And then when that didn't happen, I feel like Nintendo just sort of held back and were just like, well, we might as well put some games out now and whatever. And just the way that this thing looks, I haven't dove into it that much other than just some of the little bits of footage when they first announced it. Feels quite a small scale game, which I don't care about in terms of the production. It's neat, I'll buy it, but I'm not freaking out about it. I'm just including it because it's Mario.
How do you feel about that approach as someone who plays the Switch more regularly than I? Because for me, I'd prefer them to have a stopgap year and then come out swinging with big hitters with the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2. But obviously, if you're a fan who maybe only plays Switch games, you can definitely view this as, well, when are the big ones coming, I'm looking forward to the Princess Peach game, by the way. That might be the
that's in
only
March.
Switch game that I buy this year, but it definitely feels like they're holding a lot back.
Yeah, Nintendo have a certain scale. Like, so far, they've never done something on a Naughty Dog Rockstar level, and I'd be just so curious what that would be. Where would they even put the money? But at the same time, like, I don't mind them doing a stopgap year in terms of as long as the Switch 2 stuff comes out swinging, because it's been a long time. It's like 7 years since the original Switch, which is crazy. But we'll see. I think the Mario vs. Donkey Kong is like an interesting little concept.
Yeah.
That I think a lot of this is just capitalizing on the Mario vs. Donkey Kong scene in the movie. Because even the aesthetic of this, like obviously originally back in the 80s, they fought on pylons, which was a reference in the movie, and then now you've got a playable version of that. And you had Nintendo, I forget the name of the specific animator, talking about wanting to get Nintendo game movement to be closer to the movie, because that's what a lot of people now associate as that's how fluid those characters move, and trying to make sure everything moves very. Mario Wonder is a beautiful game, and moves very, very well. It was gorgeously animated, and it feels like that was a step in that direction.
As you can tell, I was just sneezing off camera. I'm allergic to Nintendo stuff.
Yeah,
yep, so
can't stand it.
Nothing else to comment there. You started talking about a Nintendo movie, and my allergies flared up.
Your brain just shuts down. I can't.
He's talking about the Mario movie again.
I'll tell you what will revitalize you, but not at all, is Skull and Bones finally coming out February 16th, same day as Mario vs. Donkey Kong, as opposed to Skull and Bones versus reality. I'll be amazed if this thing does anything.
What?
I was Googling when this thing started, because we've been with it for quite a while. It started as a Black Flag spin-off in 2013. I remember it being talked about back then. Yeah. That's how old I am.
Yeah.
And then it's following this. And then it was formally announced in 2017. But I remember the idea of a ship-based multiplayer game being mentioned after Black Flag, because there was also ship stuff in Assassin's Creed 3. But yeah, Skull and Bones, February 16th.
We tentatively decided to do a February look forward podcast last week, and I remember bringing Skull and Bones up as one of the big games out in February. And since we had that conversation until right now, I forgot it was coming out in February. Like, that game it's like a little bit of solipsism. When I'm not thinking about it, it doesn't exist. And I'm sure that's how Ubisoft has approached it over the past 10 years as well. I'm intrigued by this, but at this point, man, we had that great, I think it was a Kotaku one. It was definitely Jason Schreier from a few years ago. I think it was. Now I'm second guessing it. But the point is, they were looking into, why it was made, and it was not cancelled apparently because there was a deal with the Singapore government to help fund it to get it over the line. That seems like the only reason that Ubisoft has persisted when they've been cancelling a bunch of other projects for probably fewer reasons. So it's going to be interesting to live in a world where this thing is buyable and you can play it. I hope it's good. I never hope a game fails, but I think if it is just Black Flag spin-off like it was originally intended to be, I'm sure that will please some people, but like that is 10 years overdue.
The thing with this is it kind of works in their favor, because Sea of Thieves is obviously is a neat enough analog. Like, the development of this game predates Sea of Thieves in terms of being more of a talked about thing, but Sea of Thieves is in a much better place now than it was back at launch, and that game was fine enough at launch, but there's tons of content packs to it, and a solid fan base for it and community and everything. And so maybe there's a way of trying to Ubisoftify that general approach. I think those fans already have the game that they're going to keep playing. I doubt they would give up Sea of Thieves, but it just depends how much people love the naval combat of Black Flag, and then obviously it reappeared in Origins and whatever. But I don't know. This just feels like Ubisoft going like, let's segment a thing and sell you it.
Have you seen much marketing for this? Like, do you?
No. Well, they did that hands-on.
I saw there was some previews that dropped, but like in terms of getting it out there, like I don't know if they're confident in this. I imagine they want it to sell after 10 years or whatever, but like, I don't know, is this a Avatar situation where they're kind of just like, oh, we've got this game, it might be all right, you might want to play it, I don't know, we're not going to try and convince you.
No, I feel like I haven't seen much marketing for it, not much positive stuff. There was the hands-on beta thing where they showed all the monetization side of it, and all each individual piece of your ship that you're customizing can be bought as far as it looks anyway. They might have changed that now, but this long in development, if you're them, if it was a contractual obligation to get it finished, if it's some sort of government grant in the first place, all that money's already changed hands. So like, in regards to obviously the extended development, you might as well monetize the living F out of it and try and get and see how that goes, because it's kind of a lost cause anyway. And I imagine that their top brass is just saying, hit the monetization button and see what we can do with this.
I know everything points against it, but I would love to live in a world where Skull and Bones is a Game of the Year contender. Imagine that. Things would be looking up for humanity.
Odd, if this knocks Tekken 8 off the top,
exactly,
I might just be done with video games. But at least I'd be happy about it. Apparently, it's just accepting that reality. fantastic. A few days later, on February 22nd, is Open Roads, which I just wanted to throw in because it's a really cool looking narrative game, starring Kerry Russell and Caitlin Dever, who Caitlin Dever has recently been confirmed as Abby in The Last of Us Season 2. But yeah, we don't know much about this game other than it's a mother-daughter road trip game. And it just looks really cool. And I'm just shouting that out as just something that people who like the likes of Gone Home or narrative forward games, they were all the rage 10 years ago.
They were.
And
Still love them.
So I still love them myself, but you don't get that many of them anymore. And it's worth just shouting that out.
I love both of those people, by the way. I know obviously Caitlin Dever's back in the news because of the Abby casting. She's been great and stuff, but I love Kerry Russell as well. I know her only really from The Americans, but she is incredible across that series. Like, instantly became one of my favorite actors. And then when she was announced for Star Wars Rise of Skywalker,
that's all I know her for.
She was underused in and didn't show off her talents. Like, I think she was just up for an Emmy for another show that I haven't seen. But yeah, she's great. Caitlin Dever's great. I'm excited to see their performances in this game.
Give me an acting powerhouse narrative forward game. You wanted to throw in a Pacific Drive also on the same day, February 22nd.
Yeah, two like road-based driving games.
Which is why they're both together. Yeah.
I'm going to not spend too much time on this because it's a smaller game in scope, but I just like the idea of this kind of horror, supernatural infused road trip survival game where you're constantly having to maintain your car, like your car is your world in the game.
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And I liked that mechanic in Days Gone. I thought the way you had to like look after your bike in that game and constantly keep on top of it, keep adding modifications to it, repair it, make it an extension of your character worked really well. And I'm not even a car guy. Normally, I don't like car combat or anything like that in games. The one exception is Mad Max or Carmageddon on the PlayStation 1. But I like the idea of having a big sort of like mechanical beast that you have to look at that is literally your safe space from this violent world, and you have to keep on top of it and you have to look after it. There's something about the satisfaction of that I am really intrigued by. So and then you throw on the horror elements on top. So I'm interested in that, how those elements intertwine.
Yeah, man, I forgot that's what this game was. I think in my head, because they're so similar in the idea of a road trip-based game or car-based game, that I kind of did cross it over with Open Roads quite a bit. But yeah, if anyone hasn't seen the footage for Pacific Drive, it does look really promising. A week after, Star Wars Dark Forces Remaster is out on February 28th, which I don't know if you're going to get this.
Never played Dark Forces.
I did, but I was so young. Like I have such a soft spot for the old school Star Wars games, like X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. Like, I'm going back so much, but I used to love those old games on PC. And the first series of those first-person shooter games that were made on the Quake engine, I played them before I played Quake. So I was too young, but like I just there's a feel to those games, and it's why I still love playing through the original Doom. There's like a kind of like a floatiness to and like a head bob, and you're just taking dudes out. There's a flow to those games that I love, and I grew up on that stuff. I obviously went into Quake and Unreal Tournament and everything else. And so I'm just looking forward to playing something like that, because it was a few years ago, but they brought back Jedi Academy. Yeah. And what are the other ones called as well? But obviously you can go first person in them, and that was kind of like eventually that series became those ones. And so I just like, it's the same thing with Tomb Raider. It's just cool to have these games be available.
No, I agree. Like, it's cool to have it back. I like that you have that canon of Star Wars games now. Like, I was, joking about it earlier, but I genuinely love that Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace from the PlayStation 1 is now readily available. I hope Sony does more of that going forward. The game rules, man, and I have a lot of nostalgia for it. I was too young for Dark Forces. It was a little bit before my time. So I jumped on that series with Star Wars Jedi Knight 2.
Jedi Power Battles is what I was going to say.
Well,
yes.
In that series in particular, it was Jedi Knight 2 with Kyle Katarn, where you first get the lightsaber, I think. No, the one before you might get the lightsaber as well. But yeah, my first Star Wars games were Jedi Power Battles and The Phantom Menace. So one, I want to see Power Battles come back, but two, the point I'm trying to make is I never got into the more first-person Quake-style Star Wars games because I never got into Jedi 2 because of that first stint before you get the lightsaber, and it is more or less just like a Quake or a Doom level. I've tried to get into that game like 5 times. Everyone holds it up as one of like the best Star Wars games ever made, and I just struggle with it for whatever reason. So I imagine I'll also struggle with Dark Forces, which sounds even more indebted to that older, more labyrinthine first-person shooter style of gameplay, but still, it might not be for me. but I love that it's there.
The level design is the thing that makes me put them down again, because that's the thing that I think has aged them the most. Like, I can argue it's a style in terms of, like, I'm not worried about reloading. I'm not aiming down the sights. I'm just wiping dudes out, and there's loads of canned animations happening as they fly everywhere. I just love the feel of those games. But it is the level design after a while where it's like, you need the blue key card, and that's somewhere in this maze, and it's like, oh my god. So yeah, that's on February 28th. The day after, which is probably the one game out of all of these that most people are going to be getting, is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. That's out on February 29th. Only on PlayStation 5, though.
Outrageous. We talked about this briefly in the State of Play video that we just did, but yep. Up for it. I like that that's essentially going to be my next big game. You know, coming off Baldur's Gate 3, dabble in some smaller titles, maybe like Tekken 8 or Mortal Kombat 1, finally get to that.
Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, my friend?
That's too big. It's too big. Why do they keep releasing those Like a Dragon games alongside other things?
Yeah.
Or when I'm coming off a big game, I just want them to find the perfect release schedule for that. But no, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, yeah, I think... I don't even know what else to say about that at this point. I'm looking forward to it. I've kept away from most of the gameplay trailers, to be honest, so everything's going to be a surprise. I don't know anything about this part of the story from the original game, actually.
Right.
I didn't know much about the first, but I at least kind of knew some basic beats of, you know, the initial set piece, the bombing run, and, you know, some of the characters and Midgar itself, whereas now I have no idea where we are. I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what the end game is. It's really a blank slate for me, even more so than the first one.
Yeah, this is the bit in the original where, like, you would switch discs, and then it was like everything was open-ended and go to the world map and everything. It was like, back then, it was like, oh my god, how is there more game? And then we went on for another 70-odd hours. So yeah, I mean, I love how big this looks. I never really thought they would do the whole recreate the world thing, because the original game's world map is an entire world map. Like, you have different continents and everything. So to get that size across, like, I know they've said it's across multiple discs, but I think it's more of a throwback thing to just how it was on the PS1 one. But yeah, I'm curious how big the world map feels, and whether it does actually feel like a world, and it feels like you can go to the west or the east and different places that are iconic locations that are from the original. But yeah, I've said it loads, I'll not go into it loads again, but it's the story stuff that I'm there for. I'm curious, because they've talked loads about walking that line between people who are playing through, like you, who don't know the original, and then everybody who is returning, who knows the way the story's supposed to go and knows what's supposed to happen, and they're already playing with that, like they already were at the end of the 2021. So I've always said, in regards to this remake project, that I'm just going to hang back and I'll just view the whole thing holistically. I'm on board. Like, I'm up for the ride. Like, we've got one more game after this as well, so I'll look back and I'll see how it all is when we get to the end of it. But I'm trusting, because it's a lot of the original devs and original writers and everything that are doing this, that they know what they're doing.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Before we wrap up, as someone who enjoyed Final Fantasy VII Remake but didn't touch Final Fantasy VII Intergrade.
Oh yeah.
Should I play Intergrade before going into this game? Because I know they have been touting this as a jumping on point if you even wanted to come in fresh and not play the original remake. How important is Intergrade to what's coming up? Or can I just watch a YouTube video ask you?
I mean, it's worth playing. Like, it's really fun. You play as Yuffie. There's a side character in there that you do lots of combos with. Basically, in Intergrade, they debut the tandem moves that are all over this thing, where you're seeing, like, in Rebirth, you're seeing, like, Cloud and Aerith do a combo. Multiple characters can do combos at the same time. They bring that in Intergrade. Intergrade's worth playing anyway, because it just plays really well. But it's like, they have some bosses in there that are from, oh my god, like Dirge of Cerberus, or like the wider stuff from the original 10th year anniversary when they originally blew everything out. And they bring two characters back in. That wider 10-year stuff is what I'm the weakest on. Right. Like, those games weren't great. Like, I played Dirge of Cerberus, I played all that stuff, Advent Children, all, you know, every little bit of media that came with that. That's what they, and they've said they're doing this overall. They're trying to make this one unified thing now. And so if you want the full picture, then yes.
I was going to ask, so all that stuff, it was canon before, but is it canon to the remake now as well?
Well, that's, yeah.
Oh,
like,
cool.
But it depends what they do with it. It's just that oh my god, they bring in there's the whole thing where, like, I'm not going to do spoilers, but it's like, you know, Soldier. Capital letter Soldier.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That was like within Shinra. Like, Shinra's the evil company. They were making soldiers.
It was so confusing, that, by the way, not having any reference and being like, hey, is this soldier with a capital? Is it a noun, or is it just a general descriptor?
Welcome to 1997 Final Fantasy discourse, where it's just sort of like, like the idea of soldier. The wider universe said, what if there were more projects like that? And so some of that might matter. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But like, that's the wider canon, and they invoke that in Intergrade. So it's like, I don't know where we're going, which is the thing.
I am dreading and also really looking forward to the inevitable 2-hour podcast we do when this game launches and we've finished it. I'm going to need to draft old Benji Richardson back in for a day because he's going to have to be the moderator between us two as someone who hasn't played this game and someone who is so in on it that you'll know every potential deviation or anything they might have missed the boat on because I'm going to be so out of my depth.
Well, I did back in, it would have been 2020, I did like a 45-minute, because the thing is with Final Fantasy VII Remake 2020's one, I finished that at like 4 a.m. because we had the early access code to it and I knew the review embargo was the whatever the day was. So I stayed up till 4 a.m, I recorded that review thing, and then I did a big spoiler video that was like half an hour long, and I was in the mindset for it. I was living it and I knew everything about everything and I could do that. I am not that person anymore.
No.
Like, I have checked out.
That was the most insane thing you've ever done. If you ever want to know Scott Telford's dedication, I would never do that. I don't have the drive in me to
I don't know if that's what it is. I don't know if it's drive. I did not feel able to just go to bed, to be honest.
I remember you were strolling into work that day, practically having just fallen out of bed wired from the night before, having just hammered this game for like
it was
1.5
solid,
weeks. Yeah, just non-stop, and being like, I guess I'm doing the video now.
Yeah, well, I would always rather just get my thoughts down. Yeah, that review is being filmed, or was being filmed at like 10 in the morning, 9 in the morning after the 4 a.m. finish. I think I said that in the video itself. My point is that there's going to be a lot of wider stuff to talk about, and they're only going to double down on the wider conversations that fans have been having for 20 plus years now. And I can mostly keep up. It's just that if we're talking about the Sviets, then I'm a little bit out of there. But 7 people are going to know what I'm talking about anyway.
I don't know what that means, but
Sviets.
Do you reckon, I know we said we weren't going to talk too much about this, but then we found a new avenue that we haven't discussed before. Do you reckon with this one, I know they obviously need to address what happened at the end of Remake, and they obviously have some huge changes to characters that they're carrying through, but do you think they're going to be as mad with the story this time around? Because I liked that. That's what got me in. That's what made Final Fantasy VII so Remake, the way that game wraps up. But do you think they might take a step back from that and try to be more appealing to those long-term fans who kind of want a more standard remake?
No, I think they're too far gone.
Yes.
I think they're way too far gone. You've already had the set, like, we already had the Sephiroth final fight at the end of what is meant to be the opening section of the game. Like, in the trailers for Rebirth, they've showed that you're fighting Sephiroth again.
Yeah.
So it's like, I guess you just fight him again, then fight him again in the third game. Like, I don't know what we're doing with this. But no, I think they're too far gone. You can't do a traditional Final Fantasy VII remake anymore. They've got Zack everywhere. You can't do this. Like, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Honestly, that's music to my ears. I don't want a traditional one. I can go back and play 7 in various different forms at this point. I want to see what more madness they've concocted.
Well, that's the thing, and I treasure, because I loved it back in 2020 and all the conversations that we've had. I love the intersection of newcomer and veteran, like someone who knows the original story, someone who's new to it. I just love those conversations, and I hope, you pretty much know that that's what they wanted.
Yeah.
The way that they've told this story, it is very Kingdom Hearts, and it's very out there by the end of the 2021. But it is interesting noting that Tetsuya Nomura isn't the director anymore. It's Yoshinori Kitase, I think. I think it's him, who was like a scenario director or something on the original. But my point is that potentially the Nomura-isms of that dominate Kingdom Hearts, like the way that story is told. And it's an easy like shorthand for like, we're fracturing reality, are we? Oh, there's 5 of us now, or whatever. Like, that stuff assumedly would take a back seat, but because you've done that, you can't then just pretend that all that stuff didn't happen in 2020. So I don't even know,
It's
man.
peculiar, because I could never mess with that stuff when it came to Kingdom Hearts. That was way too impenetrable for me. I remember like just trying to play the original games on PlayStation, and they weren't for me gameplay-wise anyway, but just couldn't get into it. And then I really tried to get into Kingdom Hearts 3, but not having any prior knowledge, that thing blagged my head in a major, major way, and I never even finished that game. So I always found it strange how I could never enjoy those Nomura-isms in that franchise, but for some reason, the balance was a little bit better in Final Fantasy VII for my taste.
No, it is.
In terms of, giving you like those grounded characters and then giving you some mad stuff, but not in a way where it became like, what is going on?
It's more at the end of 2020's 7 remake where they go just full ham sandwich, whatever, banana sandwich with it, because they're just like, it's because obviously I'm gonna do spoilers for it's the end of the podcast.
It's the end of the podcast.
I'm doing spoilers for Final Fantasy VII Remake in 2020. The whispers were obviously the manifestation of the way the story was supposed to go, and the manifestation of fan expectation, etc. Great stuff, genius stuff, love it. But then you had that stupid thing where like Barrett got stabbed by Sephiroth, and then it was like, well, that's not how it's supposed to go. So he was just fine. And it was like, that's your, like, you can do it on the nose, but like, I don't know how many more things they do like that. Because it was more subtle when Aerith almost falls off inside her own church and one of the Whispers puts her back on the ledge.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's great. That's a great, and at the beginning I started figuring out what they're doing with that. That's cool. But that whole thing at the end of Remake where there's like a Whisper tornado. Can people see that? Because there's devastation that comes from it, and then like all of the gang get thrown into the sky, and then we fight like time itself, and then there was that whole thing where if you cast scan on the enemies, they're revealed as like, oh my god, it's like Verity, Rubrum, and someone else, and they like their weapons line up with the Sons of Sephiroth from Advent Children.
Okay,
I'm getting into the theory video that I did back then, but they're teasing this whole thing where like the new story is like fracturing everything, and then we're trying to like bring it all back together again. But that whole thing with the Whispers and the expectation, that was a cute little thing that when one of them pushed Aerith back on the ledge, that they then just detonated Oppenheimer style at the end of that game. It was like, everything exploded now, Zack's over here now, like, what?
See, I know I've said it before, that's what I loved, man. It reminded me.
But it's multiverse stuff.
It is, but that doesn't inherently mean it's bad. I was over multiverse stuff as everyone else, but I still loved the most recent Spider-Verse film. I thought they managed to nail it. There are things that do multiverse well. I'm not offered as a concept, put it that way. And it gave me the same feeling, even though I didn't have the reference points for most of the plot beats in Final Fantasy VII, as this might not work for you. I don't think you've even seen the show, but there's a bit in Fleabag, right, where the main character, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, I'm going to spoil it for you, is that okay?
Phoebe Waller-Bridge, carry on.
She's always looking at the camera, like breaking the fourth wall, and it just feels like a sort of creative flourish that isn't canon. It's just like, that's what they do. But then in season 2, they address it in the characters are like, who you talking to? What's going on? They address it in universe. And it gave me that same feeling in Final Fantasy VII Remake, where initially I was like, okay, this is cute. This is a creative flourish. But then when they did something consequential with it, that's when I was in. That's when I couldn't stop thinking about the story in a way that I might not have otherwise.
I think it's just the questions that came from that. Like, yeah, they're fascinating. It's just, and no one's ever done this before. Like, the thing is, there's only been one Final Fantasy VII. It was game changing. It was industry changing. Like, it was, it completely revolutionized the idea of what a turn-based game can be in the West. And it was just such a huge deal. It's never been remade before. They teased it 10 years ago. They're finally doing it now. And if you're going to do it, and I remember there's all the interviews with Nojima and all the various staff that have been part of it, saying that we're getting too old, and if we're going to do it, we need to do it now because it's going to take like 10, 15 years, 20 years. And so I'm embarking on that journey, and they keep referring to it as like the unknown journey continues and whatever. And at the beginning, I don't think they knew what it was going to be. I think that's why they focused so much on Midgar and said, let's just lock that down. That's why I think it goes nuts after Midgar, because they can do those cutscenes later, and it's all cutscene. You don't play anything after that final bit on the road. So it's like, you can tag that all on. Another thing that's in Integrate, when you mentioned that 10 years ago, is that they do show more of what's happening after with the gang on the road and stuff. So, I'm fascinated by it. I don't think I trust it, but I am on board with it. It's a roller coaster. It has one track, and we're just going forward. Like, if that's gonna go off, if there's no track there, we'll fall off.
I don't normally like roller coasters, but I'm on this one, and I'm enjoying it. But I also feel like I'm gonna be sick.